Hello and welcome everyone to the in-depth series of Drishti IAS. My name is Pragya and today in this discussion we are going to discuss a very important topic that is in news recently. The title of our today's discussion is India's role at climate conferences. In this discussion we are firstly going to see what are India's emissions. Then we are also going to analyze the role of India at Conference of Parties historically. Then we are also going to see India's contribution in the recent Conference of Parties. We are also going to see India's climate commitments and we are also going to analyze the Indian initiatives in this regard, and we are also going to analyze the red lines or the issues which India is trying to avoid in its talk of fighting global climate change, and in the end we are going to see a practice question for your prelims examination. So if I talk about the news or the background of our today's topic, you all know that the COP28 that is the Conference of Parties 28th edition is being held at Dubai from November 28 to December 12, and our Indian Prime Minister is going to take participation in this Conference of Parties. And India's role this year has become very much crucial because India is leading the fight against the global climate change. India is the forerunner in the fight against the global climate change. Okay. So this brings us to the question for today, that what exactly are India's emissions? Okay. So if I talk about the emissions of India, owing to its size and population, India has always been one of the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases. You will be shocked to know that India is the third largest emitter of the greenhouse gases. Okay. Its emissions have grown almost fourfold between 1970 and now. So this is not what I am stating. This has what exactly a study taken by emissions database for global atmospheric research has stated that yes, India's emissions have grown fourfold from 1970 to now. But if we talk globally, in global aspect, so in per capita terms, India's emissions are low, less than half of the global average even now. But this is not a good sign. Why? Because lower emissions per capita means lower consumption of energy, lower access to energy and poorer standard of living. So whenever the developing countries ask India to reduce its emission, India always brings up this point that yes, we need to increase the standard of living of our people to at par at the developed countries. So this is all about the India's emissions. And if I talk about the sectors which are the greatest contributors in India's emissions, that is the energy sector. Which contributes around 40% to India's greenhouse gas emissions. And then there is the sector of land transportation, which contributes around 10% to the India's greenhouse gas emissions. Moving forward, let us see role of India at the Conference of Parties historically. So India as a country has been the loudest voice for developing countries. Okay, from 1992, when the Rio Earth Summit happened, to the current Bonn Climate Change Conference. Bonn Climate Change Conference. India has argued that it is not possible for the developed countries to shift their burdens indiscriminately to the developing countries. So India has been arguing that yes, the developed countries cannot undermine their historical accountability in increasing the global average temperature when the Industrial Revolution happened. Okay, Indian negotiators played a lead role in the Kyoto Protocol at COP3 in 1997, which was based strongly on the principle of CBDR-RC. So this CBDR-RC principle points out that yes, climate change is an equal fight. All the countries are trying to fight the climate change, but the role and the contribution of the developed countries becomes even more important because firstly, they were the highest emitters of the greenhouse gases, and secondly, they have all the technology and financial means to fight the climate change more efficiently. Okay. But this Kyoto Protocol was inherently unstable in nature because it put the blame on the developed countries. It asked them to cut their greenhouse gas emissions through a certain amount, and this Kyoto Protocol expired in 2020, and it is replaced by the 2015 Paris Agreement. So now you will ask me, ma'am, what is the loophole in this Paris Agreement? So the loophole in this Paris Agreement is it has removed the mandatory shield which was provided by the Kyoto Protocol. It has removed or diluted the responsibility of the developed countries. It is said that, okay, contribute whatever you can, but you have to meet your 2030 target. So the developing countries and the developed countries have been placed on equal pedestal. Okay. And it has removed the mandatory shield of Kyoto Protocol. So this CBDRRC principle, which is also the foundation of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, was gradually eroded in every conference of parties decision. So this 2015 Paris Agreement is also an example that yes, the developed countries are now trying to undermine their historical accountability. They are saying that why should we be held responsible when the third world countries are the highest greenhouse gas emitters. So this is what they argued in the Bonn Climate Change Conference also, that no, all the blame cannot be shifted to the developed countries. Okay, and India ensures that this principle is not eroded. India always has a loudest voice for the developing countries. It says that just because the developing countries are emitting greenhouse gases, you cannot undermine your historical responsibility. You were the ones who brought industrial revolutions. You were the highest emitters of greenhouse gases. So how can you just, undermine your historical responsibility? Okay, so India is the loudest voice for the developing countries. Moving forward, let us look at the role of India at the recent conference of parties. Okay. So in the past, India played its role largely in the background, but this is not the case as of now. India has been following a more individualistic approach. India is having its own narrative. India has become more assertive in its narrative. India has been leading the global fight against the climate change, especially by becoming the voice of the developing countries. So India's stand has become more stringent and assertive and consolidated. It is not playing in the background, rather it is trying to take the leadership or trying to become the Vishwaguru in leading the fight against the climate change. Okay. So what happened in the Glasgow meeting of 2021? So this was the Conference of Parties meeting which was held at Glasgow, UK, and in 2021, India successfully managed to replace the word phasing out to the word phasing down. Okay, so COP 2021 explicitly mentioned the phasing out of coal. Phasing out of coal. So coal was mentioned for the very first time at Glasgow in 2021, and everyone was talking about that yes, you need to be less dependent on coal. You need to phase out the use of coal. But India said that it is not possible for the developing countries as of now. So instead of using the word phasing out, why are you not using the word phasing down? That means slowly and gradually we will reduce our dependency on coal. And not only on coal, India also talked about phasing down of all fossil fuels. And this was a huge concern for the developed countries, that why India is saying so. This was met with criticism, but India was stringent that yes, not only coal, we need to phase down the use of all fossil fuels, because the developed countries are not only using the coal, they are using every sort of fossil fuels, and that is why India was stringent in its stand that yes, we should not only phase down coal, we should also phase down all kinds of fossil fuels. Moving forward, let us analyze India's climate commitments. What India is trying to do to fight climate change. So, New Delhi has till now 2 nationally determined contributions. So, if I talk about these nationally determined contribution, it means the steps each country is taking to reduce its greenhouse gases emissions. So, in the first NDC, India talked about that India will reduce its emissions intensity or emissions per unit of GDP by 33 to 35% from 2005 levels by 2030. Okay, not only this, India is also trying to reduce its carbon footprints. India is also trying to lower down its emissions. India is trying to receive net zero emissions by 2070. India also stated that it will ensure that at least 40% of its installed electricity capacity in 2030 comprises of non-fossil fuel sources. So, when I was discussing India's emissions, we discussed that energy sector is contributing 40% to the India's emissions, and that is why India is planning to reduce its dependence on the fossil fuels and trying to move towards using renewable energy sources for meeting its energy demands. India also said that it will create at least 2.5 to 3 billion tons of additional carbon sink through tree and forest cover. So, this is also a plan of India, and it has been included in the National Action Plan on Climate Change, that yes, we are trying to increase our tree cover, forest cover, so that we can reduce the carbon dioxide emissions and we can build a sustainable future. So, this is also an agenda which India has in its National Action Plan on Climate Change, that definitely they are trying to save Sundarbans, they are trying to save other forest resources, and they are trying to create a carbon sink that can help in absorbing the carbon dioxide emissions. Moving forward, let us discuss. So, in the second edition of its nationally determined contributions, India announced last year that it has reached the targets of first 2 promises, having already achieved the previous targets 8 years in advance. So, India is continuously trying to enhance its nationally determined contributions. Okay, and it has also raised the emission intensity reduction target to 4% and the non-fossil fuel based electricity target to 50%. So, all of this is promised by India in its climate commitments. Now, let us discuss the India's initiatives in this regard. What has the India taken, like what initiative has the India taken to fight the global climate change? So, the first initiative is the International Solar Alliance. It is a very important alliance which talks about the use of solar energy throughout the world. And through recent years, it has become a UN multilateral agency. It was established through the 2015 Paris Agreement. And it is headquartered in Gurugram, Haryana. Then the second initiative is the CEDRI, or the Coalition of Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. So, it is trying to create such infrastructure which is immune to the impact of natural calamities such as earthquakes, floods, etc. So, this CEDRI is also becoming very important if we talk about the India's initiatives in fighting global climate change. Then there is Lifestyle for Environment mission. So, as I was discussing in COP 2022, India made the International Energy Association agree that yes, by making simple lifestyle changes, you can reduce the global CO2 emissions, and this is the mission India is undertaking by to make small lifestyle changes so as to reduce the global warming. Let me know of any other recent initiative that India has launched to fight global climate change in the comment box below. So, with this, we come to a. Now, let us analyze the red lines, which are the issues which India is trying to avoid in its talk of climate change. Okay, so the first red line is that any proposal that asks India to reduce its emissions is a strict no for New Delhi. India has been very vocal that we are going to depend on the fossil fuel for another decade, like another 1.5 decade, because we need it to increase the standard of living of our people. Okay, India's climate actions are framed in terms of emissions intensity or emissions per unit of GDP and not on emissions directly. India also fails to accept that there is a peak year of its emission. India also sidelines from the talks that when the developed countries asks India to reduce its overall emissions rather than reducing its per capita emissions. So any such thing is a strict no for India. Okay, another challenge is the emissions cut in the agriculture sector is another gray area. You know that 15% of Indian emissions, 15% of India's emission is caused by agriculture sector. How? Because they increase the emission of methane, and whenever there is a talk about methane, India sidelines itself, and same happened in the Bonn Climate Change Conference also. When India was asked about its methane emissions, India said that no, currently it's not possible to reduce it because it will have to change the cropping pattern in India, which will have a long impact on India's food security. So this is the red lines. Many promises have been done, but these issues should also be addressed. Okay. So with this, we come to a conclusion of our today's discussion. We have seen India's role at the Conference of Parties historically and even now. We have seen that what promises India is making to fight against the global climate change. We have also seen that India is playing a proactive role, is playing a leading role in fight against the global climate change. We have also seen the initiatives in this regard, and we have also seen the issues which India is not talking about or is refraining to talk about in the talks of climate change. Now let us analyze a practice question for your prelims examination. So the question is, consider the following statement. Your statement number 1 is International Solar Alliance is the Indian initiative. Your statement number 2 is CBDRRC is the foundation of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Which of the following statement given above is are correct? Your options are 1 only, your option A is 1 only, or your option B is 2 only. Your option C is both 1 and 2, and your option D is neither 1 nor 2. Kindly drop your answers in the comment box below. I hope this session was insightful for you. If you have any feedback regarding this session, kindly drop it in the comment box below. If you liked the today's discussion and found it to be helpful, kindly like the video and subscribe to our channel for more such updates. Thank you.